slides, so you're going to see slides as he talks tonight. And Woody can reminisce about almost any subject, though one of his favorite ones is horses. You're going to see some nice horse pictures. But I particularly love the one of him at 4 years old. And so here is the hawk, here is Woody, here is Ivan Wood, and he's going to give us a heck of a show.
I won't guarantee the show. If you get bored, you can go home anytime. I do want to thank Ruth for putting all these slides together for me. I do want to thank Peter Lennon for making the slides. And I'll thank Absentia, Mr. Sloan, whose book we took some of the beautiful pictures here tonight. So I'll take you, unfortunately, this is not the history of Pine Grove. That's what I'll be doing. My 63 years or 64 years of Pine Grove. But now I'm going to take you back to the land of my origin, which happens to be in Vermont. My ancestors were the first settlers into Barre, Vermont, and they settled Barre, Vermont. They were given the land by a grant of the king, so at one time they owned about one half of Barre. My grandfather had been a successful businessman in Barre, but he decided to move out of town about 8 miles away to a little town in Washington, Vermont, where he bought his farm. Surprisingly, the farm is the fourth house in the town hall. It's right in the center of town. I was born in Washington, Vermont in 1915. This is a picture of me at 4 years of age, and surprisingly, you can see it's almost horsey, because see the little shoes there? And that little cart, two-wheel cart with a little body on it, and that tongue going up there, and what a head. At this age, my mother said I used to walk down the hill to the main road. There were dirt roads in those days, and I could tell anyone who had gone to the creamery for the day, because I could tell by looking at horse prints in the road whose horse went. So I knew every horse's shoe in town.
And Woody, we decided those were potato plants, right?
Right. So we lived with my grandparents for a few years. My dad was a rural mail carrier, and there happened to be, I was number 7 of 9 children. So we had a rather large family. And while living in this small town, which is 8 miles away from any high school, my brother went to high school in Spalding High in Barre, Vermont. And he walked 8 miles in the morning and 8 miles at night for 4 solid years to get an education. My father was very educationally minded. So he decided, I've got to move out of this town and move to a town that has a school, because he wanted his children to be educated. In fact, all but one of them went to higher education. I do want to say the 20s happened to be a very, very interesting era. It was in between. It was moving from the horse and buggy to the automobile. It was moving from kerosene lights to electricity. There was no radio, no television, no computers. The closest thing, late in the 20s, it might have been in the 30s when the ballpoint pen was invented, and we thought that was the greatest invention we ever had. Because as a student in school, I'd have to write a term paper or an essay, and invariably halfway through you would blot it with a leaky fountain pen, or you'd dip the pen in the ink well, and you blot it, so you had to write it over again. So that fountain pen was a godsend, because we didn't spoil any paper. The 20s also brought about, if you lived in a small town like I did, you didn't know there was anything existed out of this town. You seldom went out of town. Occasionally you might take a train ride, but everything, your entire life was within this one town. In 1920, my dad had an opportunity to transfer to Randolph, Vermont, because they had a high school there. So we moved to Randolph in 1920. And Randolph, and there's my first home. My dad bought this home in 1920. It was a brand new home, the time he built. And I lived there all of my life, pretty much till I went to college. And it was a very nice location. It was on a plateau. There was a river going around one side of it and a brook going around the other. In order to get up to where my home was, you had to cross a bridge. And in 1927, when the bridge went out, we were homebound. We couldn't get off. We called it the addition. We couldn't get off the addition. Randolph had so much to offer. It's a town of about 3,000, but it had a great school. It had a hospital. It had Vermont Agricultural College there, out of University of Vermont. It had a woodworking factory where they made furniture. It had a gelatin factory, the largest gelatin factory in the world. And gelatin is not the type of gelatin you eat. Gelatin, they manufactured sheet gelatin, which went to all the great theaters. They put in front of the spotlights when they wanted a color light. It had a foundry, Sergeant Osgood and Roundy, where they made mowing machines, hay rakes, plows, all of that type of thing. There was 2 woodworking mills in town, plus the fact it was the place where the farmers came to do their shopping. I'm going to break this down in my talk to the seasons. I'll go through the 4 different seasons and talk about some of the activities that took place during those seasons. So I'm going to start with the fall season. As you know, it's a beautiful time of the year, and you always think of fall when we hear the squawking of the geese and the geese flying south, and then we'd know that's a forewarning that something's going to come.
And that's thanks to Eric Sloan, right, Woody?
And Eric Sloan is the man who did the picture. And come fall time was fair time. And in those days, practically every town had a fair. And I recall during my youth, school would close for one day so everybody could go to the fair. And my interest, of course, at the fair was a horse racing. And there were no horse trailers in those days, so how did they transport the horses from one fairgrounds to another? They drove them. And we would go to the fairgrounds, and I'd spend most of my time over to the horse barns and listen to the drivers talk and look at the horses and admire them. And I had several friends, boyhood friends, that were interested in horses as much as I was. So when we got home, we would have our own races. Up in the center of town, we had a big water trough, a beautiful thing. In fact, they gave it away during World War II for the medal. But it was a high metal watering trough about that high. It had 4 lions' heads around it, and each lion was spitting water, and a big tank going all around where the horses could have water. Around this area was a lot, almost a dirt track. So, as kids, for about 3 weeks after the fairs, we would play horse racing. One of us would be the horse and one would be the driver. And they'd put a rope over your head, down under your arms, and while you were at the fair, you'd always buy a little clip about this long as a souvenir. So we'd race around there. And I enjoyed being the horse because after the race, we'd go back, and if you're a horse, they'd give you cookies and a glass of milk. burning leaves. You know, you think of the leaves were put in the middle of the street and burned, and you could smell the odor of leaves. It had an aroma that to me was very pleasing. Today, it's against the law. In my area, for agriculture, corn was a big item. And they raised the sweet corn. And you can see how it's stacked up here. When it's stacked like this, it means it's going back to the barn and used for insulin. But corn to us meant many things. As a young kid, it meant going down to the drugstore and buying a 5-cent cob pipe to see what it was like to smoke. So we would fill that old corn cob full of silkweed, corn silk, and light it up, and boy, would that burn your tongue. So I think from starting with that couple of times, I never smoked till I went in the Navy, which was 24 years later. Also, in town, we had a canning factory where they canned corn. So we would go down there and get a job in the fall because they'd hire anybody who could walk. Canned corn, it was a short season. It lasted just about 3 weeks. And get down, and my job in the candy factory was to push the corn with a mix of water. Is very sweet and almost like sugar. And my job was to push it down so it went into cans. And we would can thousands of cans, and one night we would label them SS Pierce. The next night the same corn was put in cans, and it was labeled AP. The next night would be First National. So every time I go to buy a can of something, I said it's all the same corn. Also, it was a big social event. And every class in school at that time would have here's a picture of me in high school. It's hard to believe I look like that, but I guess I do. You can see I was as straight as a pole because I'm standing right here. But every school would have a social, and we call it a corn roast. So the whole class would go for an evening off to some farm, and they'd have a big bonfire. And we would put the corn with the husk in it right in the fire to roast them. And then we would have hot dogs we'd put on a stick and hold them in there to roast the hot dog. And then to finish it, we would have marshmallows. And we put the marshmallow in, roast it, then pull off the outer layer and put it back in, roast another layer. And it was a great social event, and all classes did that. Going to school was a very happy experience. I enjoyed going to school. The school I went to was one building, very much like, maybe the old high school. And the first floor, there were 8 rooms, and there were 8 grades. The second floor was the high school, and also the normal school. So you could go through the elementary school, into the high school. If you wanted to go on for 2 years of normal school, you could go on normal school and come out a teacher. At that time, you could be a teacher with 2 years of education. The school day that I went to, either elementary or high school, started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it went to 12 o'clock at noon. And then we had 1 hour for lunch. And I lived about a mile from the school, so I would run home, get my lunch, and run back because I'd want to have 15 or 20 minutes to play around baseball or some other game in the schoolyard. The afternoon was from 1 to 3:30. So the day meant we had 6 periods, an hour long. And we had 5 minutes to pass between classes at the high school level, and that was the other 30 minutes. We had to buy our own books. In those days, you got a free education if you bought your own books. So you can bet your life that we took care of our books, because the next year we would want to sell them, and if they were in good shape, you got a pretty good price for them. And we detested the days that teachers would change the books. So we might have a book and all of a sudden they decide to have another edition. So we were stuck with those books. Then the school dances. And I think the first time that I went to a school dance was in the fall. And the thing that I liked about school dances, that time I didn't dance, but they would have grand marches. I don't know whether you had it here. But when you grew up, we had grand marches, and it was always a full band that played. There was no jukeboxes at that time, radio, so you'd have a full band, 10 or 15-piece band, and they would strike up at Anchors Away, or the Caisson Song, or the Marine Hymn or something. Boy, we would jump up and get out and grab a girl and start walking around, just marching. And if you had the right to, if you didn't have the girl or somebody else had the girl you wanted to go up, you go up and tap him on the shoulder, and he had to let you walk with her. So I decided that there's a pretty little girl, the first dance I went to. I said, I think I'll march with this girl, and I marched with her. Then I said to her, do you mind if I walk you home after the dance? And she said, no, that would be fine. So little did I know that she lived 6 miles out of town. So, from that day on, I was very careful who I skipping to school. I skipped school once. It was in 1927. After the 1927 flood, and that was a very disastrous flood in Vermont, as it was here in Connecticut. And the bridge, they had built a brand new bridge in the town of Bethel, Vermont, which is 7 miles from where I lived. And I had heard that the governor of the state of Vermont was going to speak. And I liked history, so I decided today I'm going to skip school. So I skipped school, walked 7 miles to Bethel. I heard the governor speak, and I walked 7 miles back. That evening at dinner, my dad said to me, how was baseball practice? Because we had fall baseball. He said, how was baseball practice? I said, Dad, I didn't go. I went down to Bethel to hear the governor. And he said, well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that you're interested in history. But tomorrow morning, you take the baseball suit into the coach, turn it in, and you're not playing baseball for the rest of the year. And I didn't. My dad was a great man, but if he said no, he meant no. So I didn't play baseball for one season, that fall season. I learned a lesson. Never to skip school. I never missed a day of school in my life after that, including when I was principal or teaching here in Plainville for 39 years. I never missed a day of school. Another thing we did in the fall in school, and I hope that no young people will take this away, but the freshmen coming into high school, we always said we had to salt them. So we would decide today at noontime between 12 and 1 was the day that all freshmen got salted. So all freshmen had to march up to this watering trough that I told you about, and we'd stick their heads in the water there, and then we'd pour a box of salt down their back neck. So they'd have to go back and sit school with that salt in their itch all day long. But that's a way of taking the freshmen and taking the ginger up.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You know, we were talking about him going to his first dance with a pretty girl and all. Well, of course, Woody's a great sportsman. And when he was telling me the story, he says, well, when we got to halftime, and what he meant was intermission.
We also, as kids, very, very young kids, we would hunt. In our kitchen at home, we always had a shotgun, a double-barreled shotgun. We had a 25 caliber rifle sitting in the corner of the kitchen. On the windows in the kitchen, we had shotgun shells and we had shells for the rifle. And so we went hunting. There was an old man that lived 2 houses away from me, and he raised chickens. So he came over one day and he says, Ivan, will you come over and shoot some pigeons? They're eating all of my chicken feed. So I said, okay. So I went over, and the yard was full of pigeons and full of chickens. So I fired. And he said, oh my God, you got 6 chickens, you didn't get 1 pigeon. So now we moved to the winter season. This is introducing winter. That's a beautiful picture. In the winter time, what happened, about November, the snow would come. And when the snow came, they didn't plow roads as they do now. They would roll them. And here's a picture of 4 horses pulling a roller, rolling the road. So the first snowstorm to the last snowstorm, they would roll roads. So the roads at the end of February, it'd be about 1 foot of snow packed down. Beautiful sledding. Automobiles went in hibernation. Automobiles went in the garage. They jacked them up. Oftentimes they took the wheels and tires off. And in the wintertime, you wanted to go somewhere, you went with a horse and sleigh. Also, I enjoyed winter tremendously because it meant skiing. Right in my neighborhood there was a hill that I could ski on, and this little thing, apparatus here, was my favorite. You see that right there? I call that a jumper. And that mine was a iron blade that came there, 2x4, and I had the seats up about like chair height, which is 19 inches. And as kids, we would take those, go to the woodlots, jump on a sleigh. The sleigh would take us to the top of the mountain where they were hauling logs, and we would ride down there through a couple of miles, 2 or 3 miles on one of these jumpers. And we could go 25 to 30 miles on them, especially if it was on crust. These are interesting toys because they're very popular in the 20s. Here's rolling the hoop, and we'd always get a hoop off of an old wagon wheel, and we'd have races with a hoop and the stick. This game right here, I can remember playing. It would be 2 sticks with a rope in between the 2 sticks, and then you had this little thing top that you had to keep in the middle and keep it balanced. Stilts, we always had a pair of stilts we'd walk around on so it could be tall. We used to think, oh boy, we can only wear stilts and play basketball. Now they do it. One of cat was our first introduction to baseball. Game right there. One of cat was your first introduction to baseball. This is like a toboggan. The flip top, and I think you all remember that because you'd wrap a rope around that, and that top would spin like the dickens. You also would take it up to on Halloween day and put it on the pane of glass of somebody's house and spin it and make a terrible noise. So, and here's that apple ball, they call it. Well, that was putting it on the string and you're hitting that, like we call it, tether ball. Skating. Now we go to skating. And the first pair of skates that I had, they had a key. And you'd have to put them on the bottom of your shoes and turn the key, and that would tighten up a clamp. It would tighten them on your shoes. Then you'd probably put a piece of leather around and hold them all. And then we went to the shoe skate, and that worked very nicely. And in the neighborhoods around, there are a lot of frog ponds and the brooks and the rivers, and they trees over. And we'd love to get to the period where you had what they call rubber ice. I don't know whether you've ever, rubber ice is thin ice, but it goes up and down like this, and we play around with that. But dangerous because you could fall through it. And then sleigh riding. And here's a picture of, that's had to be 1906, but my dad had two horses and the sleigh, and he would pedal a mail by horse. The route was 25 miles a day, so he had to go 25 miles a day by horse and sleigh in the wintertime to deliver mail. And it was extremely cold. He had a fur coat, bearskin coat. He had buffalo robes. He wore felt shoes and a fur hat. He also, my mother would put in what we call, that would be soapstone into the oven and get that very hot and wrap that in flannel. And they would put that in the bottom of the sleigh, and you could put your feet on it to keep them warm. And throughout every 5 or 6 miles, some woman on his mail route would have another stone in her oven, and when he got long, she'd bring out the hot stone, take the cold one, so he could keep his feet very warm. I can recall when I was in school, and the mailman in those days delivered mail regardless. And he would say, today I have to keep you out of school because you're going to have to walk ahead of the horse and break the snowdrifts. Snowdrifts might get 5 or 6 feet high, and the horse couldn't go through it, so we'd have to go through the snowdrifts, make a path for the horse to go through. Also interesting, when my dad was a mailman, we'd get phone calls from people on his route and ask him, would you please bring a loaf of bread out? You go to the drugstore and get some aspirin and this and that. Then sleigh riding. And here's a picture of yours truly and Ruth in the sleigh. This happened to be up in Woodbury, Connecticut at a sleigh rally where you compete. And this was in the costume group, and we won first prize. And you can see Ruth with her hat, she had a big feather on that. And in the when you are driving in a show like this, they come around and they check everything. You want to know if you have a foot warmer, and you do have usually foot warmer. I had a foot warmer that had cakes of charcoal you could put in it, and light that charcoal, it would keep your feet warm. They check your whip, they check your horses, they check everything. One time in a horse show, such as this, the judge came up to me and said, you have a foot warmer. I did, and I said, I don't need them today. This girl riding next to me takes care of that. Here's another picture of us up to Woodbury with a sleigh. This happens to be a Portland sleigh.
No springs in that sleigh.
Here you can see the outfit that Ruth had on. Nice green there.
Woody? Woody,
Pardon?
excuse me, to go back to your dad's route, how long would it take him to do the 25 miles?
It would take him probably, I would take the horse down and tie it back to the post office when I went to school at 8 o'clock. So I'd take the horse down about 20 minutes late, tie the horse there, put a blanket on it, and my dad would have gone down at 7 o'clock to put the mail up. He would leave the post office at 8 o'clock, and he would get home around 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Not bad.
Our times when I got out of school at 3:30, he would be coming and I'd catch a ride home. He later transferred to another route, and he was able to go half the route in the morning and half the route in the afternoon, so he's home for lunch and he could change horses. So that worked very well.
Woody,
yes.
talk about Bucky and Teddy a little bit.
Well, these are two of my favorite ponies that I acquired right after I retired from being principal. And I kept him. He lived in Plainville. You saw me driving those on Cook Street, down in Northern Park. I gave them away when they were about 30 years of age, and they lived 2 or 3 years after that. They're both gone now. They were big ponies. I competed I competed with them in carriage classes against some of the best drivers in the country up in Farmington. And if they, one day at the Farmington show, I took 4 blues out of 5 classes against some very, very good horses, because these ponies would never make a mistake. And they look much better than that. Going on to slaying, as I told you, the cars were put up in the winter. No one drove a car in the winter time. Occasionally, there might be a taxi that would drive, and they always had chains on their back tires. But most people took the car, jacked them up, and left them in the garage. So they had a livery stable where you could get a horse you had to get somewhere. My dad had the two because he had to have it to deliver mail. So oftentimes I'd get a call from a school teacher that who lived out, was teaching in the one-room school, probably out of the country 7 or 8 miles. And one day, one called me up and asked me if I'd take her Sunday afternoon back to her school. I said, sure. Well, going back, taking her back, what happened, I don't know, whether I got interested or something, but I went over a culvert, we tipped over, and the horse ran away. So we had to walk back to town. I never knew how she got to school. Then, going to school in the winter time, clothing. And here's a typical sweater that we used to wear. See this, and this up here I call a toque. You probably call it a watch band, but we call it a toque. And these sweaters usually were brown with a buff-colored collar on it. And you can see these cotton jerseys were sold for 79 cents. Caps were very, very popular. Vests very, very popular. You went into the store man probably might be wearing a cap. He always wore a vest, and around his arm he'd have black ribbons to hold up his sleeves. This is very interesting. See, we wore knickers, and we wore long socks. And now those knickers were only 59 cents. Can you imagine that? But then you realize that they were working the whole day for 75 cents in the mill. 3 blouses for $1. But this was a type. Now I wore knickers like that until I got well into high school before I went to long pants. And we would always wear in the winter high shoes that laced way up just below the knee. And always on the side of those shoes you had a pocket for a knife. You always carried a big knife. And we carried jackknives, we carried big knives of that in school. The knife, if you're around a horse, you have to carry a knife for safety. But this is our kind of clothing that we wore, and we wore long johns. So here's an example of. Here's the example of long johns. Maybe these were made right across the street at the Plainville Living Room, probably. They had the drop seat with the trap door in the back. You had the half length, and then you had the full length. The full length up here, you can see it came all the way down to your ankles. So they were very popular. Even the school, the heated school, you wore the long johns and clothing then was always wool, heavy wool, because you could run a pouring rain and the wool would absorb a lot of rain, and you wouldn't get wet. Then we come to Christmas time, which is so very, very important. And we always had the tree, and probably a week or 2 weeks before the tree went up, we would be popping popcorn and stringing popcorn, and you can see the popcorn strings right there. And then we would take paper, colored paper, and make paste out of flour, and cut little strips about 3 or 4 inches and turn them into circles, and then hook them together like a chain, and they'd be red, white, and blue, and all different colors. And you can see here's the chains. You look on the end of this, I know you can see the end, but they're candles. And they're real candles. And you would light those candles up occasionally. It was dangerous. You always had a bucket of sand and a bucket of water underneath the tree. And the presents always went under the tree. And we had our tree would be after dinner. After we had dinner, in the afternoon we would gather around, and my dad would act as Santa Claus and hand out the presents. You had to open the present one at a time, show what you got, and thank the person who gave it to you. My dad was always a great believer in buying one present for the family. And one year he came home with a Victrola, and what a pleasure that was. We cranked that old Victrola up and put a record on. He had beautiful music. Another year he brought home a portable pool table that we could set up in a room and play pool with the boys. There were more boys and girls. Another year he brought a piano home so that we could all learn to play the piano. I never played basketball, so I didn't play the piano. But here's some of the toys that you'd be getting at Christmas time. A tricycle.
Yeah, right.
With those high wheels. They were great. You could always take your buddy for a ride on that back, put his feet on that back axle, hold it. Imagine that cart there for $4.69. If you buy a cart like that, it was stenciled, beautiful colors, green and gold stencil. If you bought a cart like that down the English country, now you can pay $200 or $300. How would you like to have that little metal automobile? And that was pumped with a chain and pedals. That was $5.25. This is a wooden cart that now when you pay around $75 and find one, it was $2.55. Remember this toy? You push the handle forward, pull it back, it would turn the chain, and you go forward. You could go quite fast. And here's a goat cart or a dog cart. You could buy this cart, hook a dog to the shafts or a goat, and that was only $2.28. A baby carriage, all you girls had, was only $2.28. But remember, you were working for $10 to $12 a week. Then another place we loved to go was to the blacksmith shop, because you have the horses that you know wear shoes, and in the springtime, wintertime, it would get rather icy, so you'd have to take the horse to the blacksmith shop. And I always enjoyed going to the blacksmith shop because it was like this. This would probably be like I'd be sitting around listening. The blacksmith is putting the shoes on. They were always hot shoes, and I loved the smell of the hot shoe going on the horse's foot. That bird smell. If they're in the Dodger neighborhood, they love to chew that stuff too. But they make their own shoes on the ankle and keep the shoe red hot to put on the horse. Nail it on. We paid at that time probably $2.50 to $3 to shoe a horse. Right now, today, if you brought a blacksmith in to shoe your horse, it would be $150. And they have to have new shoes every 6 weeks. Another thing that was very interesting, when I was about 10 years of age, I had a very good friend. We were always traveling around together. But there was an older fellow, 24, 25. Jack Dempsey was very popular in those days. The world champion boxer, and Sonny Corbett and all those guys were very popular. So he decided that he was going to run boxing matches every Saturday night. So he cleaned out the top of his barn and put some benches around it and put a ring in there. And then he solicited kids like us to box. So every Saturday night we'd go down, put a pair of shorts on and box. We boxed 3 rounds. And probably get 10 cents. So I could say I was a professional boxer. And boy, the first time he hits you, it's not fun. Second time he hits you, it's not fun. So then you get kind of mad, you go slugging at him, and I swear that's the reason I smell through my nose. But I was on the nose, and we thought that was fun. Basketball. In the 20s, basketball was up in high school. In fact, I told the state of Connecticut with the banquet just recently that in 1921, 22, 23, my sisters were playing basketball, and I'd go down to watch them play. And they played boys' rules. They played very good basketball. Here in Connecticut, they played six-man basketball until 25 years ago, which six-man is really not basketball. And my sisters were very good basketball players. When I was growing up at the same time, we put our own basketball court up in a haymow, and we used, believe it or not, beach baskets. Same as Naismith did when he invented the game. And I did have the opportunity to be Naismith who invented the game of basketball while I was in college. Playing basketball in high school was a very interesting experience. Girls always played the preliminary game, and then the boys played. There was no junior varsity. So the first year I went out for basketball in the 9th grade, I wasn't very big. But I went out for basketball, the coach said to me, you're going to have to play with the girls. And play with the girls. And don't put your hand on them. So I can tell you, playing basketball against the girls, not being able to put a hand on them, I learned to be a very good defensive player, and I learned to fake and dribble and to get around them and not touch them. We also had games as kids in the wintertime. The first snowstorm that came along, we would play with geese and fox and geese, make a big circle and crisscross it, and we would play that game. In the playground at high school, when they shoveled the snow, they put all that snow in a great big pile. So then at recess, go out to recess, and it was always, the class was split up, half up on the hill, half down. So those that were down try to dislodge those on the hill, and try to not let the other group take over. And we would do that for 15 to 20 minutes. We had a pretty good tussle too, but it was interesting. Then Valentine's Day came February 14th. It was a very interesting day because in grammar school they'd have a big box, and you would make Valentines. You take the wallpaper books, and you'd find the prettiest ones, probably with roses or something like that. Cut them out and make your own Valentines, and probably write roses are red and violets are blue and sugar sweet, so are you. And everybody put them in the box, and then we'd have the teacher to take them out and distribute them. I thought, personally, I didn't like that because I always felt sorry for that poor girl that was over in the corner and don't want her basket to dance. And I used to always say, when you go to your first prom or first reunion, she's going to be the girl that shines when you go to that first reunion. So don't bypass that girl you think is ugly. But that's what we did for Valentine's Day. Boy Scouting was very important to me. I had a wonderful scoutmaster. He had been in World War I as an officer. He graduated University of Vermont. Very, very intelligent man. And I learned a lot from Boy Scouting. In fact, I got to the point where I reached the Eagle Scout rank, and it stood me in good because when I went to college, I got a $50 scholarship to be an Eagle Scout. But as a Boy Scout, a neighbor of mine lived about a half a mile away. And we'd go up the railroad track and find some of the old wire they'd taken off of the telegraph poles. So we took it and strung it from my house down to his house, down through the woods, and we put up a Morse code, and we talked to each other back and forth with that. Now, I don't have time. would be a foot of snow tied down, and then the February thaw would come and start melting that snow. And running down through the middle of the roads would be water. And we would make little sailboats out of paper or birch bark, and we would sail them down the ruts in the road. It was great fun. Then she got a picture up here, which is very popular in spring, because they get the automobiles out of the garage and put the wheels and tires back on it, but they forgot that back in the dirt roads it was mud. So oftentimes they would venture out in the country roads and get stuck in the mud, and they'd have to get a farmer to come down and pull them out. See, you can all see these agreed expressions. One time when I came home from college, I boarded my dad's car because I wanted to go to visit my sister who lived on a farm out in the country, and I got stuck and had to get a farmer to pull me out. Another thing in February was sugaring. Making maple syrup. And of course, Vermont is loaded with the dried maple. And sugar, by hand, they take the auger and they would pour into the tree and put a sap spout in it and hang a tin can or a wooden bucket. The wooden buckets they used, they would always wash, repaint the inside of them every year. And I probably bet paint. About that. And then we love to go out where there was sugar. We take raw eggs with us and put it in while they were boiling down the maple syrup, and we could have boiled eggs. We might get a syrup. We'd get a pan full of sugar and pour the syrup on that, and we'd have what they call sugar on snow. They had a lot of churches would always have a sugar on snow party where they'd bring in fresh snow and they'd put syrup on it, and it's like eating taffy, but with that you would have a raised donut and a sour pickle. Well, a great time. When spring got along, the first place without any mud was usually the railroad track. So if we wanted to take a hike, we would walk up the railroad track. That would be all bare ground, and we walked up. And we had about a mile up the railroad track. We had a bridge we called the tin bridge. I guess that's a term we used in those days for a bridge made out of steel. We called it the tin bridge. And this bridge was rather long, and so we would always put our head down the rails. You put your head on the rail, you can hear there's a train coming. So we'd get across the bridge before the train coming. We always carried with us slingshots. Now, not the kind of the rubber bands, but there was a piece of canvas with two pieces of rawhide put. One had a loop on it, you put it over the finger, the other was pulled, and you swing it like David did with Goliath, and you let go of it. We got to be pretty accurate at hitting those glass things on top of the telephone pole. We also played that other game you just put up there. Right here, snap the whip. And I think you probably all played that. The poor guy on the very end, boy, when he stopped and they pulled it, you got to go around and around pretty fast, and all of a sudden, away he would go.
That's compliments of Winslow Homer. We really borrowed liberally.
Good.
Now, the one thing I always wanted when I was a kid was a goat. You hear about Mr. Patrick McGinty had himself a goat. Well, I wanted a goat and a goat cart. Well, that whole outfit right there, you see the goat, the car was probably $3. But I never got a goat. But I always wanted one to drive it. Well, you can see the goat cart, the harness, and everything was $6.98 to drive a goat. And they're pretty good driving. Then at recess, when you're in the elementary schools, or not at recess, at noontime, you run back, and boy, you might have a penny. And you'd go over, we're going to buy candy today. And right across from the school was a store that sold penny candy. So you can see these kids here looking at the candy, and they were always under glass. And you would look and you say, well, how many of these for a penny? How many of these for a penny? And if you had somebody with you, probably get the one with 15 for a penny. Another, oh, you always went for amount. So that was great. Another thing, in the springtime, as soon as the entrance to school, we got bare, the concrete would be bare, the snow would be gone, marbles came out. And you had a bag of marbles or your pockets full of marbles, and we played a game that you'd sit down and put a marble in front of you, then put a white line in back, and those in back would take their marbles and try to hit that marble. If they hit it, they took your place. So sometimes you get lucky, you get a real pocket full of marbles. You go into school, you didn't realize that maybe you had a hole in your pocket. And all of a sudden you get that marble grip and roll down, the teacher would claim that, so you might go home with no marbles, the teacher had them all. Springtime always brought out the baseball glove. Every kid would take his baseball glove and attach it to one of the belt loops, and you went through school from February till the day you graduated, carrying the baseball glove on your belt. Then you came up to May Day. That would be late spring, and that's the 1st of May. And May Day was a great day to go picking flowers. We'd go out in the woods and pick up paticas, mayflowers, jack-in-the-pulpits, adder-tongues, trillium, all of the wildflowers you could find. And then we'd make a little basket, about like a paper cup. Here again, the welfare of the books, various the material. We'd make those and put the flowers in them. And May Day, we'd run and hang them on the doorknob and ring the doorbell and run. That was a great thing to do as a kid when I was growing up May Day to make the May baskets. Now we come into summertime. And summertime, no better way to introduce summertime than a bandstand. Every town, I mean every town had a bandstand. And every town had a baseball field. And every town on the baseball field had a grandstand. Beautiful grandstands. Baseball was a great sport. Summertime meant working. My dad was a great believer. When I was 6 and 7, this is my brother and myself, we were 6 or 7 years of age. And my dad said to us, I don't think it's going to be wise for you kids to hang around town in the summertime. I think I'm going to find a place to put you on the farm and let you work a little bit and learn, because all you hang around town, all you can do is get yourself into trouble or something. So when we were 6 and 7, he found a friend of his who had a farm and said he'd love to have 2 boys because they could redo his strawberry patch. They could help haying. They could help with the milking. They could put the cows out to pasture and bring them in. So we did. We worked all summer long, but surprisingly we both developed a very bad cough. And we didn't know what. We were coughing all the time. So the woman of the farmer's mother was there. She said, I know how to cure that cough. If you go down and pick all the white daisies you can find, the white daisies like this, to bring it to me. So we went down, probably got a bushel of white daisies. She put them in a big old brass kettle, boiled them, put water in them, boil them, and then she would give us that for us to drink. And you know what that was? She was giving us a pure alcohol. And what we had was whooping cough. So I think she had a drunk all summertime. And I guess it cured the whooping cough. Another job, which is corn. All right, another job that I had when I was about 8 to 9 years of age. Farmers would come around and ask me if I'd want to work on Saturday riding a horse cultivating corn. with the machine, and they'd hold the cultivator, and I would ride the horse. And you have to be very careful when you rode a horse cultivating corn, because you have a path about that wide. You had to make sure you kept the horse in that path so you'd step on the corn and destroy corn. So I would probably work all day long and get maybe 15 cents for that. Then, when I became 10 years of age, I worked for a man who had 4 horses, and he had a big woodlot. And they were getting out ash trees, ash logs about this size long, and those logs were, the lumber was going for Louisville Slugger backs. So he had taught me years before to drive horses, so 10 years of age, he said, I will pay you $10 a week if you will act as a teamster for me. So I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, clean the horses, feed them, and harness them. At 10 years of age, workhorse harness is heavy, but I would get them on, all 4 of them. He'd help me hook them into the wagon, and then I would go to the woodlot. That was about 4 miles away. When we got to the woodlot, we'd take 2 of the horses and tie them to the wheel of the wagon, and the other 2 I would take to skid logs. Now, skidding logs, they would cut the logs into this length. And skidding logs, the logs are way back in the woods. So you'd have to put a chain around these logs, and the horse would pull it down to what we call to a skid row, and we'd leave the logs there. 2 horses, I had 2 horses that would skid. All I had to do was hook the chain on and pat them on the rump, and they would head to the skid row. If they got stuck, if they hit stones or something, they'd stop and let me put a rolling hitch and pull them out. We would skid all day long with those horses until we got a load like this. This happened to be on a sled, but we had them on a wagon. And they would load that wagon up. The 2 men working in the woodlot would load that wagon up for me. And I hooked the 4 horses on, and I would drive to the mill in town, where the owner would drive down his car would meet me. So anytime for about 3 years, all I did was, in the summertime, would drive horses. Plus and back. One summer, I was working in the woodlot. He decided that he hired someone to cut logs by so much 1,000, and he threw me in with a deal. You could have to help pull on the saw. Well, that was before chainsaws, and all you had was that long hand saw. And I happened to be from Principal. He was a very ambitious guy. He was getting so much 1,000, and I was on the end of the other end of the saw with him. The more he cut, the more money he made. Well, I tell you, he gave me work, and I should have shoulders like that. And then we would take 2 weeks off from logging to go haying, because you had to get hay for horses. So we would go haying, and I enjoyed haying. Haying to me was a lot of fun. There were things I didn't enjoy. Usually early in the morning, I'd hook 2 horses to a mowing machine and have to mow for 4 or 5 hours in the morning, and I think all the time mowing around those fields, which got to be very monotonous, going around and around cutting hay and watching out for you didn't run into a bird's nest or a mouse nest or something. But I think at that time I said, boy, I'm going to study, get an education. I'm going to do this all right. Here's a picture of haying, and this picture was taken about 1918. And I was 3 years old on that horse. I'm the one on that horse. Right there. This is my dad at that time on the hay, and this is my grandfather. And this is what we call a bull rake. There's one up downstairs. This rake, they made sure that when you put the hay on the load, you went around the bull rake, you didn't lose one bit of hay. Hay was very important. This is an old Morgan horse that you can see, and I'm really driving this horse. I have the reins here. So this is me.
What's the horse's name? What did he?
Topsy. That horse's name was Topsy. Then to this rake, and you go around and you either trip it with your foot. Push your foot down, that raises the teeth, and you drop the hay out, then you take your foot off that, and the rake drops down and rakes. Or you might have a lever up here that you had to pull to trip it. And here's another job that took 2 or 3 hours to do haying. I always loved lunchtime when I was haying, because that gave me a half hour to take a nap. For lunch, we usually had a sandwich, and I would take cucumbers and salt. In hay fields, we would have, for a drink, rather than water, we would drink sugar, vinegar, and water. Sometimes we put ginger in. It acted the same way as the drink the athlete used today to get the electrolytes going in your system. But that's what we drink. Occasionally somebody would bring a bottle of root beer.
Talk about the Hames, Woody.
The hames, or those hames on the horse, there's always on a point to shine them with grass. And the hames right there, they go around the horse's collar. This is a very poor fit on this horse. But at the top was always grass, and we had that shining, that little point when you did.
And those might have been made right here in Plainville, right?
Probably, yeah. Then, at nighttime in school, after school, after we had supper, we'd probably go outdoors and play games. We might go out, and where I lived, we had a little park, and we'd play baseball in that park until dark. Or we would play, the neighborhood kids would come around, we'd play run, sheep, run. We'd play red light. We'd play can on the rock, hit it and run the tide. These are all games we played. Then the old swimming hole. May 31st was the day that we appointed to take our first swim. So we hoped Memorial Day was warm. Memorial Day was the first day that we went swimming. And we were swimming in a hole very much like this. Like the railroad, when I told you about the Tin Bridge, and it was a nice swimming hole right over the old Tin Bridge, which we could run. And here's one of the canals here. They're swimming, but we used to swim here. And we also had a day in June. We would build a raft and go out, and this is the day you're going to learn to swim. So, who was the first one off? Okay, I couldn't, you couldn't swim, but then my day to jump off and start paddling like a dog, and you learn to swim. I went on in the summertime. Now we'll get to baseball, and baseball probably was my favorite game. I played baseball by the hours. I had a tennis ball and a glove, and the back steps were concrete, and I hit that concrete with the tennis ball, and if I caught it, the man is out. I'd play a whole game. If I didn't catch it, he was on base. And I would play that, and I swear, because I played that game, that I developed the trait that like all ball players to develop, that when the ball hits the bat, you know exactly where it's going. If you're playing the outfield, you don't look to see the ball up in the air, you watch the bat. The minute it hits that bat, you should know where that ball is going. So you get a head start. And I learned that trait very much. Baseball, no little leagues. We organized our own teams. We'd go down, when the town team played, they broke the bat, we would salvage that, probably screw it together, and put tape on it. We would chase, at their games, we would chase the balls, find an old ball, we might re-sew it, or we might roll tape on it and use the tape. And Saturday mornings as young kids, we'd go down in somebody's pasture, put 3 stones down, make a diamond, and play baseball. We organized a team every year, and we made arrangements to play in the neighboring town of Bethel. So to go to Bethel, we went on the train. The train came through Randolph in the morning, and this is the railroad station. If you notice the railroad stations, that they always have this protruding out. That's where the telegraph operator always operated. So he could see both ways up and down the track. So we arranged a game with Bethel. We take the train. We pay 14 cents for a round trip ticket. It was several miles away. So we get down to Bethel. We get there about 10:30 in the morning. And then here's the diamonds. So we go up and play baseball and no umpires. We just played one team against the other. Probably ended up into a fight. So I don't think he ever finished the game. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, back we would come. So that's baseball. Talk about railroads. Talk about railroads. I had a brother who was a railway, my older brother was a railway mail clerk, and later became supervisor of the railway mail here in the Northeast. But he ran the Montreal line. Montreal ran from Montreal to Washington, D.C. And it would go through my hometown just about midnight. And he would be on that train. It didn't stop. But he would hang out the window. He probably held that little iron thing that you pull out and would catch a mailbox when he went by. And he'd throw it right in the car. But I might go down certain late nights because he might throw something weighted out with a message. So I take it back to the play. Surprisingly enough, they carried 45s all the time. All the time they were on duty in the mail car, they wore on the hips a 45. Going back to swimming, I later developed swimming and took my first examiner's lesson in swimming from Commodore Longfellow. Commodore Longfellow was a man who weighed 300 pounds. He is the inventor of the Red Cross life-saving course. He's the first man who invented that. I took my first exam in the White River, very cold water, and he was a 300-pound man. The trainer hold on me to try to break it. It was difficult. And then I served as lifeguard from the time I was 17 until I finished college. In 1970, when I was about 16 years of age, the government had a program called CMTC, Citizen Military Training. And it was a great program. I don't know why they don't bring it back today. But 16-year-old boys could go to Fort Ethan Allen, Vermont, or Camp Devens, Massachusetts. I wanted to go to Fort Ethan Allen because it was a cavalry unit. And I wanted to go up there and learn to ride horses. If you went to this camp for 4 years, you got a commission in the Army. So I went up at the age of 16. We wore World War I uniforms, and they're wool and very, very hot. So we wore them in the summertime with a necktie. And to take you a half hour or an hour sometimes to roll those puttees that you had on your legs. It's like a roll of bandage. And you had to roll those up. The officers, of course, they had those big, high, fancy boots. But we went up there, 16-year-old kids. I happened to be with a group from New Haven, some Irish kids from New Haven, and I learned the way promotion paid for most kids. But we'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We'd have to make our beds. We'd have breakfast. We would go out and dig trenches. We'd shoot rifles. You can see, I think there on my chest is I was a marksman. So I won a marksman badge. But we had recreation, evening, basketball, baseball, and sports. We did everything in that 6 weeks that you would do today in basic training in the military and the Navy. And that used to be a great stick. When I was in the Navy, my first job was drilling boots. And I remembered my experiences here, and that made me a much better trainer of boots. In 1920, Here's my first ride in an automobile. And my folks said, we're going to Washington, this is 1920. We're going over to the White Mountains today, 2 cars, your uncle and your dad, and about 10 or 15 miles, you have a flat tire in those days. And there I am. This is my older brother, who probably was 15 or 16 at that time. You could see the outfit, the shoes, the stockings, the knickers, and you know, you wore suit coats pretty much all the time, and hat. This happens to be one grandfather, second grandfather. There's 2 grandfathers right there of mine. So this picture I follow. So this is what happened, and this is the end of the story. So what I learned growing up in the 20s is it's better to climb a tree and fall than it's not climb at all. And thank you for listening.